The Mishnah, from the verb shanah, or to study and review, also secondary, is the first major written redaction of the Jewish oral traditions known as the Oral Torah. It is also the first major work of rabbinic literature. The Mishnah was redacted by Judah the Prince at the beginning of the 3rd century CE, in a time when, according to the Talmud, the persecution of the Jews and the passage of time raised the possibility that the details of the oral traditions of the Pharisees from the Second Temple period would be forgotten. The majority of the Mishnah is written in Mishnaic Hebrew, while some parts are Aramaic. The Mishnah consists of 6 orders, each containing 7 to 12 tractates, 63 in total, and further subdivided into chapters and paragraphs of verses. The word Mishnah can also indicate a single paragraph or a verse of the work itself, i.e., the smallest unit of structure in the Mishnah. For this reason the whole work is sometimes called by the plural Mishnayot, structure. The term Mishnah originally referred to a method of teaching by presenting topics in a systematic order, as contrasted with Midrash, which meant teaching by following the order of the Bible. The Mishnah is a written compilation accordingly orders its content by subject matter, instead of by biblical context as the Midrashim do. Likewise it includes a much broader selection of halakhic subjects, and discusses individual subjects more thoroughly than the Midrashim. The Mishnah consists of 6 orders, each containing 7 to 12 tractates, 63 in total. Each Masechah is divided into chapters and then paragraphs. In this last context, the word Mishnah means a single paragraph of the work, i.e., the smallest unit of structure, leading to the use of the plural Mishnayot for the whole work. Because of the division into 6 orders, the Mishnah is sometimes called Shas, though the term is more often used for the Talmud as a whole. The 6 orders are Zeraim, dealing with prayer and blessings, tithes and agricultural laws, Mode, pertaining to the laws of the Sabbath and the festivals, Nashim, concerning marriage and divorce, some forms of oaths and the laws of the Nazirite, Nezikin, dealing with civil and criminal law, the functioning of the courts and oaths, Kodashim, regarding sacrificial rites, the temple, and the dietary laws, and Tohoro, pertaining to the laws of purity and impurity, including the impurity of the dead, the laws of food purity and bodily purity. In each order, tractates are arranged from biggest to smallest. A popular mnemonic consists of the acronym Zedman-Nakat. The Babylonian Talmud states that there were either 600 or 700 orders of the Mishnah. Hillel the Elder organized them into 6 orders to make it easier to remember. The historical accuracy of this tradition is disputed. There is also a tradition that Ezra the scribe dictated from memory not only the 24 books of the Tanakh but 60 esoteric books. It is not known whether this is a reference to the Mishnah, but there is a case for saying that the Mishnah does consist of 60 tractates. Interestingly, Reuven Margolis posited that there were originally 7 orders of Mishnah, citing a Gaonic tradition on the existence of a 7th order containing the laws of Star, M and Baracho. Omissions. A number of important laws are not elaborated upon in the Mishnah. These include the laws of Tzitzit, Tefillin, Mezuzah, the holiday of Hanukkah, and the laws of conversion to Judaism. These were later discussed in the minor tractates. Nissim ben Jacob's Haggadah Lemaftichat Talmud notes that many of these laws were so well known that it was unnecessary for Judah to discuss them. Reuven Margolis suggests that as the Mishnah was redacted after the Bar Kokhba revolt, Judah the Prince could not have included discussion of Hanukkah, which commemorates the Jewish revolt against the Seleucid Empire. Similarly, there were then several decrees in place aimed at suppressing outward signs of national identity. including decrees against wearing tefillin and tzitzit. As conversion to Judaism was against Roman law, Judah would not have discussed this. David Z.V.I. Hoffman suggests that there existed ancient texts in the form of the present-day Shulchan Aruch that discussed the basic laws of day-to-day living, and it was therefore not necessarily to focus on these laws in the Mishnah, Gemara and Talmud. Rabbinic commentaries on the Mishnah from the next 4 centuries, done in the land of Israel and in Babylonia, were eventually redacted and compiled as well. In themselves they are known as Gemara. The books which set out the Mishnah in its original structure, together with the associated Gemara, are known as Talmuds. 2 Talmuds were compiled, the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. Unlike the Hebrew Mishnah, the Gemara is written primarily in Aramaic. Content and purpose. The Mishnah teaches the oral traditions by example, presenting actual cases being brought to judgment, usually along with the debate on the matter and the judgment that was given by a notable rabbi based on halakha, mitzvot, and spirit of the teaching that guided his decision. In this way, it brings to everyday reality the practice of the mitzvot as presented in the Bible, and aims to cover all aspects of human living, serve as an example for future judgments, and, most important, demonstrate pragmatic exercise of the biblical laws, which was much needed since the time when the Second Temple was destroyed. The Mishnah does not claim to be the development of new laws, but rather the collection of existing traditions. The term Mishnah is related to the verb shanah, to teach or repeat, and to the adjectives sheni and Mishnah, meaning second. It is thus named for being both the one written authority secondary to the Tanakh as a basis for the passing of judgment, a source and a tool for creating laws, and the first of many books to complement the Bible in certain aspects. Oral law. Before the publication of the Mishnah, Jewish scholarship and judgment were predominantly oral, as according to the Talmud, it was not permitted to write them down. The earliest recorded oral law may have been of the midrashic form, in which halakhic discussion is structured as exegetical commentary on the Torah. Rabbis expounded on and debated the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, without the benefit of written works, though some may have made private notes, for example, of court decisions. The oral traditions were far from monolithic, and varied among various schools, the most famous of which were the House of Shammai and the House of Hillel. After First Jewish-Roman War in 70 CE, with the end of the Second Temple Jewish Center in Jerusalem, Jewish social and legal norms were in upheaval. The rabbis were faced with the new reality of Judaism without a temple and Judea without autonomy. It is during this period that rabbinic discourse began to be recorded in writing. The possibility was felt that the details of the oral traditions of the Pharisees from the Second Temple period would be forgotten, so the justification was found to have these oral laws transcribed. Over time, different traditions of the oral law came into being, raising problems of interpretation. According to the Mevohat Talmud, many rulings were given in a specific context, but would be taken out of it, or a ruling was revisited but the second ruling would not become popularly known. To correct this, Judah the prince took up the redaction of the Mishnah. If a point was of no conflict, he kept its language. Where there was conflict, he reordered the opinions and ruled, and he clarified where context was not given. The idea was not to use his own discretion, but rather to examine the tradition as far back as he could, and only supplement as required. The Mishnah and the Hebrew Bible. According to Rabbinic Judaism, the oral Torah was given to Moses with the Torah at Mount Sinai. Mount Horeb is an exposition to the latter. The accumulated traditions of the oral oral law expounded by scholars in each generation from Moses onward, is considered as the necessary basis for the interpretation, and often for the reading, of the written law. Jews sometimes refer to this as the Masorah, roughly translated as tradition, though that word is often used in a narrower sense to mean traditions concerning the editing and reading of the biblical text. The resulting Jewish law and custom is called halakha. While most discussions in the Mishnah concern the correct way to carry out laws recorded in the Torah, it usually presents its conclusions without explicitly linking them to any scriptural passage, though scriptural quotations do occur. For this reason it is arranged in order of topics rather than in the form of a biblical commentary. The Midrash Halakha, by contrast, while presenting similar laws, does so in the form of a biblical commentary and explicitly links its conclusions to details in the biblical text. These midrashim often predate the Mishnah. The Mishnah also quotes the Torah for principles not associated with law, but just as practical advice, even at times for humor or as guidance for understanding historical debates. Authorship. The rabbis who contributed to the Mishnah known as the Tanaim, of whom approximately 120 are known. The period during which the Mishnah was assembled spanned about 130 years, or 5 generations, in the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. Judah the Prince is credited with the final redaction and publication of the Mishnah, though there have been a few additions since his time. Those passages that cite him are his grandson, Judah II, and the end of Tractate Sota, which refers to the period after Judah the Prince's death. One must also note that in addition to redacting the Mishnah, Judah the Prince and his court also ruled on which opinions should be followed, though the rulings do not always appear in the text. Most of the Mishnah is related without attribution. This usually indicates that many sages taught so, or that Judah the Prince ruled so. The halakhic ruling usually follows that view. Sometimes, however, it appears to be the opinion of a single sage, and the view of the sages collectively is given separately. As Judah the Prince went through the tractates, the Mishnah was set forth, but throughout his life some parts were updated as new information came to light. Because of the proliferation of earlier versions, it was deemed too hard to retract anything already released, and therefore a second version of certain laws were released. The Talmud refers to these differing versions as Mishnah Rishona and Mishnah Acharona. David Z.V.I. Hoffman suggests that Mishnah Rishona actually refers to texts from earlier sages upon which Rabbi based his Mishnah. The Talmud records a tradition that unattributed statements of the law represent the views of Rabbi Meir, which supports the theory that he was the author of an earlier collection. For this reason, the few passages that actually say, "This is the view of Rabbi Meir," represent cases where the author intended to present Rabbi Meir's view as a minority opinion, not representing the accepted law. There are also references to the Mishnah of Rabbi Akiva, suggesting a still earlier collection. On the other hand, these references may simply mean his teachings in general. Another possibility is that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir established the divisions and order of subjects in the Mishnah, making them the authors of a school curriculum rather than of a book. Authorities are divided on whether Rabbi recorded the Mishnah in writing or established it as an oral text for memorization. The most important early account of its composition, the Epistle of Sharia, is ambiguous on the point, though the Spanish recension leans to the theory that the Mishnah was written. However, the Talmud records that, in every study session, there was a person called the Tanner appointed to recite the Mishnah passage under discussion. This may indicate that, even if the Mishnah was reduced to writing, it was not available on general distribution. Acceptance. Some Jews did not accept the written codification of the oral law at all, known as Karaites. They comprised a significant portion of the world Jewish population in the 10th and 11th centuries CE, and remain extant, although they currently number in the thousands. Mishnah studies. Textual variants vary roughly. There are two traditions of Mishnah text. One is found in manuscripts and printed editions of the Mishnah on its own, or as part of the Jerusalem Talmud. The other is found in manuscripts and editions of the Babylonian Talmud, though there is sometimes a difference between the text of a whole paragraph printed at the beginning of a discussion and the line-by-line citations in the course of the discussion. Robert Brody, in his Mishnah and Tosefta studies, warns against oversimplifying the picture by assuming that the Mishnah-only tradition is always the more authentic, or that it represents a Palestinian as against a Babylonian tradition. Manuscripts from the Cairo Geniza, or citations in other works, may support either type of reading or other readings altogether. Manuscripts printed editions. The first printed edition of the Mishnah was published in Naples. There have been many subsequent editions, including the late 19th century Vilna edition, which is the basis of the editions now used by the religious public. Vocalized editions were published in Italy, culminating in the edition of David ben Solomon Altares, Publ. Venice 1737. The Altares edition was republished in Mantua in 1777, in Pisa in 1797 and 1810, and in Livorno in many editions from 1823 until 1936. Reprints of Livorno editions were published in Israel in 1913, 1962, 1968, and 1976. Most of these editions contain notes of textual variants as well as vocalization. The Livorno editions are the basis of the Sephardic tradition for recitation, for example in memory of a deceased person, as well as being printed on its own. The Mishnah is included in all editions of the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds. Each paragraph is printed on its own, and followed by the relevant Gemara discussion. However, the discussion itself often cites the Mishnah line by line, while the text printed in paragraph form has generally been standardized to follow the Vilna edition. The text cited line by line in the Gemara often preserves important variants, which sometimes reflect the readings of older manuscripts. The nearest approach to a critical edition is that of Hanok al-Beck. There is also an edition by Yosef Qafih of the Mishnah together with the commentary of Maimonides, which compares the base text used by Maimonides with the Napoli and Vilna editions and other sources. Oral traditions and pronunciation. The Mishnah was and still is traditionally studied through recitation. Many medieval manuscripts of the Mishnah are vowelized, and some of these contain partial Tiberion's cantillation. Jewish communities around the world preserved local melodies for chanting the Mishnah, and distinctive ways of pronouncing its words. Most vowelized editions of the Mishnah today reflect standard Ashkenazic vowelization, and often contain mistakes. The Albeck edition of the Mishnah was vowelized by Hanuk Yalin, who made careful eclectic use of both medieval manuscripts and current oral traditions of pronunciation from Jewish communities all over the world. The Albeck edition includes an introduction by Yalin detailing his eclectic method. Two institutes at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem have collected major oral archives which hold extensive recordings of Jews chanting the Mishnah using a variety of melodies and many different kinds of pronunciation. These institutes are the Jewish Oral Traditions Research Center and the National Voice Archives. See below for external links. Commentaries. The two main commentaries on the Mishnah of the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. Neither work covers the whole Mishnah, but each work is on about 50 to 70% of the text. The reason that the Talmud is not usually viewed as a commentary on the Mishnah is because it also has many other goals, and can get involved in long tangential discussions. However, the main purpose of the Talmud is as a commentary on the Mishnah. In 1168, Maimonides published a comprehensive commentary on the Mishnah. It was written in transliterated Judeo-Arabic and was one of the first commentaries of its kind. In it, Rambam condensed the associated Talmudical debates, and offered his conclusions in a number of undecided issues, of particular significance. So the various introductory sections, as well as the introduction to the work itself, these are widely quoted in other works on the Mishnah, and on the oral law in general. Perhaps the most famous is his introduction to the 10th chapter of Tractate Sanhedrin, where he enumerates the 13 fundamental beliefs of Judaism. Rabbi Samson of Sens was, apart from Maimonides, one of the few rabbis of the early medieval era to compose a Mishnah commentary on some tractates. It is printed in many editions of the Mishnah. It is interwoven with his commentary on major parts of the Tosefta, the Rosh's commentary on some tractates, the Meiri's commentary on most of the Mishnah. Rabbi Obadiah ben Abraham of Berpenora wrote one of the most popular Mishnah commentaries. He draws on Maimonides' work but also offers Talmudical material largely following the commentary of Rashi, in addition to its role as a commentary on the Mishnah. This work is often referenced by students of Talmud as a review text, and is often referred to as the Bar Tenura or the Rav. Yom Tov Lipman Heller wrote a commentary called Tosafot Yom Tov. In the introduction, Heller says that his aim is to make additions to Bettino Ro's commentary. The glosses are sometimes quite detailed and analytic. That is why it is sometimes compared to the Tosafot discussions of Babylonian Gemara by French and German scholars of the 12th–13th centuries. In many compact Mishnah printings, a condensed version of his commentary, titled a Tosafot Yom Tov, is featured. Other Acharonim who have written Mishnah commentaries: the Melichet Shlomo, the Vilna Gaon Rabbi Akiva Eiger, the Mishnah Rishona on Zeraim, and the Mishnah Acharonah on Tefhoro, the Sidrei Tefhoro in Kalaman Oalot by Gershon Henoch Leiner, the Radziner Rebbe, the Gulo Iliyo on Mikvo, the Ahavat Eitan by Rav Avraham Abakrenitz, the Chaz on Ish on Zeraim and Tefhoro. A prominent commentary from the 19th century is Tifrei Yisrael by Rabbi Israel Lipschitz. It is subdivided into two parts, one more general and the other more analytical, titled Yachin and Boaz respectively. Although Rabbi Lipschitz has faced some controversy in certain Hasidic circles, he was greatly respected by such sages as Rabbi Akiva Eiger, whom he frequently cites, and is widely accepted in the yeshiva world. The Tifrei Yaakov is an important gloss on the Tifrei Yisrael. Simcha Petrushka's commentary was written in Yiddish in 1945. Its vocalization is supposed to be of high quality. The commentary by Rabbi Pinez Kahati, which is written in modern Israeli Hebrew and based on classical and contemporary works, has become popular in the late 20th century. The commentary is designed to make the Mishnah accessible to a wide readership. Each tractate is introduced with an overview of its contents, including historical and legal background material, and each Mishnah is prefaced by a thematic introduction. The current version of this edition is printed with the Bat Tenura commentary as well as Kefati's. The encyclopedic editions put out by Mishnat Rav Aharon on Peah Sheviah Berakhite, Hala, and Yadayim. The above-mentioned edition, edited by Hanuk Albeck and vocalized by Hanuk Yellen, includes the former's extensive commentary on each Mishnah, as well as introductions to each tractate and order. This commentary tends to focus on the meaning of the Mishnayot themselves, without as much reliance on the Gemara's interpretation, and is, therefore, considered valuable as a tool for the study of Mishnah as an independent work. Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ginsburg wrote a commentary on ethical issues, Musar Mishnah. The commentary appears for the entire text except for Tohara and Kodashim. Shmuel Safrai, Chana Safrai and Zedev Safrai have half-completed a 45-volume socio-historic commentary, Mishnah Teretz Yisrael. As a historical source, both the Mishnah and Talmud contain little serious biographical studies of the people discussed therein, and the same tractate will conflate the points of view of many different people. Yet sketchy biographies of the Mishnaic sages can often be constructed with historical detail from Talmudic and Midrashic sources. According to the Encyclopedia Judaica, it is accepted that Judah the prince added, deleted, and rewrote his source material during the process of redacting the Mishnah. Modern authors who have provided examples of these changes include J. N. Epstein and S. Friedman. Following Judah the prince's redaction, there remained a number of different versions of the Mishnah in circulation. The Mishnah used in the Babylonian Rabbinic community differing markedly from that used in the Palestinian one. Indeed, within these Rabbinic communities themselves there are indications of different versions being used for study. These differences are shown in divergent citations of individual Mishnah passages in the Talmud Yerushalmi and the Talmud Bavli, and in variances of medieval manuscripts and early editions of the Mishnah. The best-known examples of these differences is found in J. N. Epstein's introduction to the text of the Mishnah. Epstein has also concluded that the period of the Amorim was one of further deliberate changes to the text of the Mishnah, which he views as attempts to return the text to what was regarded as its original form. These lessened over time, as the text of the Mishnah became more and more regarded as authoritative. Many modern historical scholars have focused on the timing and the formation of the Mishnah. A vital question is whether it is composed of sources which date from its editor's lifetime, and to what extent is it composed of earlier or later sources. Are Mishnaic disputes distinguishable along theological or communal lines? And in what ways do different sections derive from different schools of thought within early Judaism? Can these early sources be identified, and if so, how? In response to these questions, modern scholars have adopted a number of different approaches. Some scholars hold that there has been extensive editorial reshaping of the stories and statements within the Mishnah, lacking outside confirming texts. They hold that we cannot confirm the origin or date of most statements and laws, and that we can say little for certain about their authorship. In this view, the questions above are impossible to answer. See, for example, the works of Louis Jacobs, Baruch M. Boxer, Shay J. D. Cohen, Stephen D. Fraud. Some scholars hold that the Mishnah and Talmud have been extensively shaped by later editorial redaction, but that it contains sources which we can identify and describe with some level of reliability. In this view, sources can be identified to some extent because each era of history and each distinct geographical region has its own unique feature, which one can trace and analyze. Thus, the questions above may be analyzed. See, for example, the works of Goodblatt, Lee Levine, David C. Creamer and Robert Goldenberg. Some scholars hold that many or most of the statements and events described in the Mishnah and Talmud usually occurred more or less as described, and that they can be used as serious sources of historical study. In this view, historians do their best to tease out later editorial additions and skeptically view accounts of miracles, leaving behind a reliable historical text. See, for example, the works of Saul Lieberman, David Weiss Alavni, Avraham Goldberg and Dov Zalotnik.